Thank you, Anna, so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Alicia.
When did Silk Roads come out?
It came out, let's see, October 14th, 2025 in the US, and I believe it was, I don't know, like a week earlier in the UK, maybe October 9th. So
How are you
relatively
feeling?
recently. Oh, that's my computer making noises. I'm feeling good. I don't know how to make that stop. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
No, I mean it's funny. I've obviously, this is the first book I've ever published. I've come to this kind of newish industry late in life, so to speak. I'm
Yeah.
in my mid 40s at this point. And so it's been really exciting, but just kind of a weird emotional roller coaster. Like I was trained as a lawyer. Like I know how like law firms work. I know how you move up the ranks or not. And so this has really just been a kind of whirlwind of
Yes.
experiences and emotions. I mean, net positive for sure. I'm really pleased, but I'm like, oh, that's how that works. Oh, that's how that doesn't work out.
Yes.
It's been a really like extraordinary learning experience, truly.
Yeah. No, I
What
love
about you?
what the novelist Marlo Granados, I love what she wrote once because it really articulated something that I couldn't articulate, which was that creative professions are the only ones where you get better, but you don't, nothing else changes. Like your work gets better, but there's not more money, there's not more anything else. Like there, it's just, you just keep getting better, but everything else about your life stays the same. And it can be very, very disorienting, I think.
Yeah, there's no corner office,
No.
like there's no, I mean, it is very disorienting. And
Yeah.
but I think that's really freeing as well to sort of be like, no, there is no corner office. Like you're not necessarily, the goal is not set in stone. It is
Yeah.
in fact to sort of, want to write a second book or not, if that's what you don't want, or a third or fourth, and to try to make it, yeah, make it better and continue to sort of expand your horizons both mentally, physically, and on the page.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
absolutely. Well, what took you from law to a cookbook?
Love. So I live in the UK. I'm married to a British man, a Scotsman, and I basically ended up moving over here. And I'm a customs and trade lawyer. I'm still a New York City or New York State bar admitted attorney. But I was working in customs and trade in downtown Manhattan, and I moved to the UK, and it was pre-Brexit. And basically, recruiters did not know what to do with me. They said, well, we're part of the EU. We don't have customs regulations with
Right.
our trading partners. And because we're part of the EU, all of our trade deals are negotiated, on an EU basis. We don't even understand, like, they actually didn't understand what a trade customs and trade law was.
Right.
So I pretty much, gave up that career, not out of, not purposefully, it just kind of happened. And yeah, no, I just started cooking a lot and recipe testing for some wonderful food writers over here who really encouraged me to just kind of move further into that sphere. And so it just kind of like happened rather organically. And I think, it might sound cliche, but I became a mother over the course of that time as well. And it was really important for me to sort of cook more from home and also share a lot of my like both American and Iranian culinary
Yeah.
heritage with my son. So I was always sort of being like, okay, what can I do to sort of expose him to these parts of my culture, parts of our heritage, but through food and especially like
Right.
Iranian stews for little kids. They're so soft and they're comforting and they're flavorful without being kind of like overwhelming on the palate to a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it just kind of like snowballed.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, this is kind of an off-topic question, but I'm just curious, why customs and trade? Have
Honestly, because so my background is in China studies. I
Hmm.
started going to China in 1997. I was there for a long time in 98. Every summer during university, I moved to Shanghai after college. I was to have a master's degree in Chinese. I was all like China studies, basically. I worked at the China Institute in New
Right.
York for a while. And I went into law, frankly, Lisa, to like try to make some money because
Yeah,
like
yeah,
the
yeah.
nonprofit world in New York City in 2006 was like painful. It was really, really satisfying work-wise, but I mean, I couldn't pay rent,
Yeah.
frankly. And so I went to law school and I was like, all right, I'm going to make some money and I want to do something like international, and customs and trade was just kind of fun to me. Like, it was not, and especially when you're dealing with China, it wasn't kind of a it's not a country in which you necessarily wanted to get involved in 2011 in contract law or property law. These are sort of relatively and, kind of remain relatively unsettled things in Chinese and Western like law interaction. So customs seems like an easy way. Like China was always going to pay its duties, and the U.S. were going to impose
Right.
tariffs, and like the China had entered the WTO. It was a straightforward way to get into international law that like I found rather appealing, and it was quite fun. It
Yeah.
was just, I mean, it's these things that we never realize, I think, or I hadn't really realized. And I mean, now tariffs are obviously in the news, more than they ever were like my
Yeah.
entire
Yeah.
life. But we don't really realize that what goes on in terms of like the economics and legals, in terms of just the transnational transportation of goods, of food, of people, of all of everything. Like I was working on like sunscreen products and then
Wow.
like handbags to be sold in the Middle East and certain ones that couldn't have pork products in the, it was just all of these little things that were kind of like putting a puzzle together. So yeah, it just kind of
Yeah.
it happened and then it's no more.
Well, does that experience inform how you write about food?
I think so. I mean, I think that, it wasn't even I hadn't really. It was all done to my agent, I have to say. In the book proposal stage, she was like, "Lean into your background as a trade lawyer. You're talking about in this proposal, which was, the kernel that became Silk Roads, was, all about the travel and the trade of
Yeah.
goods and the movement of people and food and flavors and dishes." And she was like, lean on that,
Yeah.
this is what you actually did. And so there was a whole section sort of in my book proposal that was like, I used to write about whether, you could import snake skin from Africa and get around sanctions. And that was how I'd sort of always thought of international trade. But you can really look back, hundreds, if not thousands of years to the way that we have always sort of traded internationally and how food has been a part of that from the very, very beginning. So I actually hadn't really, to be honest, had not thought of it. I was like, kind of, I think I had this mental block, like, all right, I'm not a lawyer anymore. I'm not going to really think about, this kind of not failed career, but stalled career.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to like just jump into this food writing and food history-ish writing. But yeah, no, my agent was like, no, lean on that. Don't forget that. And I have, in some of the head notes, I think it's like two or three of them in the book, I actually like talk about customs law and sort of how to classify things and why I've actually put a recipe in one chapter versus a different one. And I just say like, hey, I'm using kind of like customs and trade classification rules because this is my book and I can do it. And just sort of playing on that kind of trade law sort of basis.
Yeah. Well, can you talk about how you mentioned it in the book, and I know you've discussed it elsewhere too, but how Silk Road became plural and when we're growing up and we're going to school, we're hearing about the Silk Road and here
Yeah.
it's Silk Road. So how did that change come about? Why is it important? And why was it important to be the title too?
So honestly, the Brits call it Silk Roads. I don't know when they decided over here, and I hate using that sort of like large term of they, but when I was in the process of writing the proposal, my proposal was Silk Road because like this is what I'm familiar with as Americans. This is the
Yeah.
terminology that we have grown up with, and that still goes on. I mean, besides my book, I mean, I think maybe Peter Frankopan's book, Silk Roads in the US is called Silk Roads as well, but that had already sort of come out over here. And people just were sort of very, very familiar in the UK with using that terminology. And so to begin with, I just kind of ran with it. I was like, okay, and maybe we'll change it for the US edition. But over the course of writing the book, I was so happy that we went with Silk Roads because I realized the plurality actually is so central to not only the network of trade roads, quote unquote, roads
Yeah.
themselves as they existed, but also to a larger story that I was wanting to share and tell in the book as well, in terms of the multiplicity of networks and movements of people and goods and flavors and food and dishes across the world, and the importance of sort of kind of looking at things from that view that lens of multiplicity, right? Like there is no one road, there's no one way, whether that's like, a person's career path or how an apple got from Kazakhstan to, Massachusetts. Like there is no one direct path ever, right? And so these to sort of to take the notion of a trade route that it was never an actual route. It was many routes. I mean, people talk about the maritime Silk Roads, like whether, this, you can talk about this on the sea as well as overland. That I really wanted to sort of just stress the fact that are these networks. And I like, in my brain, I think of it as looking top down on a topographical map of a river and a riverbed, and sort of how you get the little like fingers sort of extending out from a river that kind of just flow, and maybe they'll stop or maybe they'll run into a different, body of water. And it's just this extensive web almost. And to sort of show there's not, it wasn't just a question of things being sort of traded from China to Rome. The British Library, not library, the British Museum last year had an exhibit of the Silk Roads at the British Museum that basically had it start in Korea and in England. They said, we're going to talk about the way these things even made their way to England and how we can date sort of this gem found at Sutton Hoo to India. So they did all this like research to find out that this, in this like who knows how this stuff got to Sutton Hoo, that in fact one of the rubies in there, they can sort of carbon date or whatever you do with gems and prove and show that it actually originated in India. So that can kind of like connect so many different cultures and people together. And I think the Silk Roads can be kind of like a metaphor for that sort of continual, constant interaction between people, countries, cultures. And I think it's important to just note, like, it's not just one way. There's a lot of, especially in this day and age, like, let's not pretend that there's never been immigration and movement.
Yeah.
Um,
No, it's so interesting because I've been reading your book along with the book club selection of this month, which is now Nightshade,
mhm,
an Egyptian culinary history of the tomato by Annie Gall. And she sort of begins with that premise as well, which is that the way we might imagine in a Eurocentric perspective that the tomato got to Egypt is not necessarily how it did that. It may have come through the East and it may have come through the
mhm,
Indian Ocean. And I just love the idea of, accepting what we don't know and examining the plurality of possibilities so that, because we don't, I think it just makes it's a more generous perspective, but it's also a more truthful perspective, and so digging into those multiplicities of perspectives and those pluralities of possibility when it comes to how foods moved around, I think is just so much more rich and interesting. And it was so funny, not funny, haha, but funny to read these books in tandem last
mhm.
week and to be like, oh wow, there's so much of similar thinking happening here. And it's really good and it's really generative and it's exciting.
Well, I mean, I think I mean, at least for me, like that's the kind of thing I want to read. That's what I want to learn
Yeah.
about. And so I wanted to be able to write about that as well. Like, I think it is sort of, I think it's definitely in my proposal. It's definitely in the intro. I say, we talk about like where food comes from, right? Like,
Yeah.
let's get over to our farmer's market and, like make sure everything's locally grown. But like, where did that tomato come from? How did it get there to begin with? Like,
Exactly.
there
Yeah.
is so much history in there and it's so interesting. And it can, I think, enrich our minds and our plates and just the way we like look at what we consume or what we
Yes.
don't, what we choose to not consume as well.
Yeah.
It's just I'm a dork. I love this stuff. Like I'm very excited about this. I'm gonna take that book on the plane with me to New York on Saturday and
I
hopefully
love
get
it.
through enough to join on the discussion next week. But
Amazing. Well, can you tell me about where you grew up and what you ate?
yeah, so I grew up in suburban Detroit. My dad's from Iran. My mom is from suburban Detroit. And her family came over to the US on both like the name Mayflower and via, Ellis Island into Brooklyn in the late 1800s. So I'm like very weirdly American and, an immigrant, child of an immigrant. So we ate a lot of sloppy joes. We ate a lot of hot dogs. We ate a lot of burgers and we ate a lot of Iranian food. We ate a lot of beautiful like rice dishes with the crispy gazmak, which most people know it as tadig, but I know it as gazmak, kebabs, stews, just I mean like a lot of corn and peach. I
Yeah.
mean, Midwest also is really, I think, gets a bad rap in America for food culture,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to like people don't realize how good, we know in the East Coast, like, yeah, New Jersey corn is spectacular, right? Michigan corn is better. Michigan corn in the summer. So there's like just beautiful apples and corn and cherries and just gorgeous fruit and vegetables. So my family has always kind of been a real raw fruit and vegetable people. My mom and my sister have been vegetarian for kind of as
Oh,
long as
cool.
I can. I mean, I think my younger sister, she's a couple years younger than me. She's been vegetarian since like age 6. My mom was basically always vegetarian. So, frankly, the meat that we were eating was never really cooked that well. Love my mother, but I was like, oh, I finally eventually had some chicken. I was like, oh, that's what roast chicken is supposed to, because she didn't know, she's
Yeah,
making this
yeah.
stuff that she herself doesn't cook and doesn't eat. But so, and I grew up in a household, no shellfish, no pork, but not because of real religion, just because of just habit. My
Yeah.
father had grown up not eating any pork, so we didn't eat pork. And especially with a mother who's a vegetarian, we were not going to eat, pepperoni on our pizza.
Eh,
So it was just a lot of fruit and vegetables and a lot of rice. And then I really I'm kind of looking to have to revisit a sloppy Joe. My son is 7, and I feel like he might need to eat one.
He's the
Um,
right age. Yeah.
the right age.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it was really just this kind of mishmash of Iranian food and American kind of classics.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
can recommend there's a dish called the Sloppy Dave in the Superiority Burger Cookbook, which is a
Ooh.
vegetarian spin on
Ooh.
it. So
Nice.
just in case if you're interested in that one, in the Sloppy Dave.
I am. I mean, obviously, I know you are a, dedicated
Yeah.
vegetarian.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, we just don't eat like a ton of meat in our household
No, no.
either. So I'm always looking to sort of figure out how to maneuver around that. We have a Scottish husband, especially. They're like, wait, what? We don't have
Ooh,
sausage today? I'm like, no, we don't have
yeah. I've
it.
had a vegetarian Scotch egg, which was really interesting.
Mm.
I'm sure you have
Yeah, I've
noticed.
had,
Yeah.
there was one here that was at our local pub when my son was like under a year old that had cannellini beans as the quote unquote sausage
Ooh,
around the egg. And it was so lovely. And it was really nice to like feed a little infant as well. We were just
yes.
like, here, have some soft egg. And then also this, I mean, I actually liked it, but I'm not yeah. Because I grew up in this household, we didn't eat a lot of these things.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
really,
yeah.
it's still, I have a hard time kind of embracing certain dishes and ingredients that are sort of beloved by, so many. Just because I'm like, oh, really? No, I'm good. I don't need to have that. Um, yeah.
Yeah. No, actually thinking about this now, the one that I had was so good because it was a combination of a Puerto Rican alcapurria and a falafel. So it was like grated
Ooh.
plantain, but well, and then there's chickpeas involved in it and the spice. Anyway, so now I'm like, you know what? I have to do that.
Yeah.
I haven't
Yum.
thought about it in ages.
Yum, 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 yum. I love a plantain.
Well, who has had the biggest influence on how you eat and how and in what way?
I mean, I guess my father, I
Yeah.
think that in terms of both because I do love, Iranian food so much. I mean, I made Iranian food last night for dinner. I was like, I need some. I just especially with Iran in the news these
Yeah.
days, especially I'm like, I want this food, but those are the sort of like the flavor profiles. But just, that his heritage, my heritage has influenced me. But just the like love of fruit and vegetables and the raw sort of ingredients of, the land. Like,
Yeah.
just enjoying the fact that there's nothing better on a summer's day than like a freshly shucked, ear of corn that you barely need to cook because it's
Yeah.
so sweet and perfect as is. And just yeah, but really, and like nuts. I mean, we used to we'd go to my dad's house in Michigan and be like, and walk into the refrigerator or in the pantry and like look in the refrigerator and all there would be is like bags of frozen, bags of like walnuts and pistachios and like berries. And we're like, what are you, Daddy? Are you like a squirrel? What is this? It's just like nuts and berries, but this kind of very, very simple, but very natural kind of choices that you make to sort of get your nutrients, not from like overcooked but from, that raw cucumber with every meal and
Yeah.
tomato and herbs. So I'd say my dad, but then I think, my mother as well. Like I said, I think growing up in a household where half of us were vegetarian, I think just kind of not necessarily assuming that every meal has to have meat on the plate as well is something that is I carry forward. And certainly even in writing Silk Roads, I wanted to make sure that there were a number of not just sort of salad dishes, but main courses that could suit a vegetarian diet because like
Yeah.
this is like I my sister I remember was like 10 years ago she was like if I have to see another pasta with butternut squash and sage
Yeah.
it was that time of year like that was like anything that was the only dish you could get and she's like there's not even protein in this
Yeah.
um so, just recognizing the importance of sort of satisfying those needs culinarily has definitely also been on my mind always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it makes a lot of sense to learn about the vegetarians in your family.
Yeah.
I think in terms of your approach for sure. Well, how would you describe your appetite?
My appetite, never ending.
Yeah.
I feel like no, I mean, I think that's it's such a loaded word. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously I'm constantly curious. I always am wanting to like learn more, see more, eat more, taste more, go more places. Like so that like larger notion of appetite, I feel like I can't imagine just sitting around and being like, here we are. I'm retired now and I'm done with like exploring,
Yeah.
so from that, that perspective, but like real appetite, I just want something real tasty.
Yeah.
Like on the plate, I want to be satisfied. I don't want anything to be bland. I'm interested in the excitement and the discovery, and whether that be in a day-to-day life or on the table. And just continuing just to learn. I'm just like
Oh,
a little dorky about,
yeah.
yeah, which I like. I embrace it. I'm 44 years old. I'm like, you know
Yeah.
what? I'm not gonna pretend to be someone that I'm not. Like, I
Yeah.
enjoy discovering things, and I feel like I don't know. I'm very excited for your book. I love the title. I love the notion of appetite, and just something, especially from a female perspective, really like explores ideas of the body and
Yeah.
sexual
Yeah.
emotions and what. So, there's a lot. So yes, never ending.
It has so many connotations,
I
it's true.
know. It's
And I think
great.
it's a very loaded word. And the
Yeah.
interesting thing about it to me is I remember when Anthony Bourdain put out his cookbook and it was called Appetite. And I was just so jealous. And I think that's why the subtitle of this book is featuring it so prominently because I was like, oh, like how do I get some of that? And obviously like Anthony Bourdain is like a huge influence on so many
Yeah.
of us, but also just the role he was able to play in the culture and the fact that like he was really able to speak to so many people is so influential. And so when he had that like used that word for his cookbook, I was like, I want to be allowed to use that word too.
Well, I mean, I think
I'm
I
really
think
glad that I got
I think
yeah.
it's wonderful, and I think it's important as well, especially as a female food writer,
Yeah.
to be able to sort of have that and claim that. I mean, you talk a lot about like MFK Fisher and her discussions of like appetite and sort of
Yeah.
and that like that body that's tied up in there, but. That was a long time ago. Who's right?
Yeah.
Like, like let's get that, let's get that in your subtitle and get that out there and claim it for,
Yeah.
the sort of feminist perspective I think that it has as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Exciting.
Well, which is your favorite meal of the day?
Probably dinner. I like a big spread.
Yeah.
I love a dinner party. I I work from home, so I'm not really like a lunch person per
Yeah.
se. I mean, my lunch is sort of random whenever it is. I think I had something at like 2 o'clock earlier today. I don't even know what I had. I do love breakfast. I love eating breakfast out. Um,
Oh, that was going to be my next question. Is your favorite meal to eat out? Yeah.
I love breakfast out. So like I don't do breakfast at home that much. My son eats Weetabix because he's British. And my husband too. And I just sort of like watch them with my cup of coffee. I'm like, oh, okay. But I love eating breakfast out. I that's just something in my family we've kind of always done. Gone to the diner or sort of the deli and just had, fried eggs and hash browns and toast, no bacon. Um, But I've embraced the English breakfast. I love the baked bean situation
Yeah.
over here. I think it's very fun and delicious. Dishoom does masala baked beans, which have the
Ooh,
like lovely Indian spice to them. But in terms of the actual meal, like I think because I have to say rice is my favorite food, like period, end of story. And yes, you can have a lovely rice lunch. You can have a lovely rice for breakfast as well, and I have on many, many occasions. Um, but I want some Iranian rice. I want a salad with probably some meat and some sauce and just like platters across the table. I like a bountiful sort of thing. And I don't think that you really necessarily get that unless you're in some like grandmother's house in France,
exactly.
having like a big lunch. You're not really getting
Yeah.
that for the lunch time. But
No.
yeah,
No.
dinner, always.
Well, for you, is cooking a political act?
I mean, I guess so. I mean, I think
Yeah.
cooking is a political act for all of us. I don't think I necessarily, it's not the first thing I think about when I think about cooking, but I think it's kind of impossible to take them apart if you start to
Yeah.
really think about food and think about where your food comes from, think about what kind of cuisines you're representing on the plate and why you're doing that and what you want to share or not share, where your ingredients come from, what you are choosing not to include again or to include. Those are all tied up in politics. But I don't necessarily think that and I don't always, think about it when I'm in the
Yeah.
process of cooking. I think it just is inherent. And I think that we are maybe more of us realizing that as sort of, these discussions become more mainstream, that, yeah, all of these choices do have political repercussions. And they have not just repercussions, excuse me. We're making these choices because of politics and political decisions that have been made without our, input or whatnot. Like the
Yeah.
reason we're eating this or we're cooking that is because somebody somewhere has decided it's going to be cheaper to sort of import, chicken from the US to England, like that is not a choice we're making, but we are making it when we cook it. So I think cooking is always political.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't eat. I specifically, I buy my meat from a very specific place that is not cheap, but is a purposeful choice. I will not buy from the grocery store and sort of contribute to sort of this mass agricultural meat industry. So that's the one I will say in my house. Like that's a very specific choice that we make that I guess is political and economic and environmental as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you. This is so fun. It's so nice to meet you.
Yeah, so
I
nice meeting
really
you.
like this. I feel like I've seen your face a gazillion times and on the screen, but not like in an interactive
Yes.
way like this. No,
Thank
thank you,
you.
Alicia.
Thank you.